Well, it is great to be with you this evening. My name is Zoe Davis. I'm a project manager with the City of Boston's Environment Department on the Climate Ready Boston team. And I am the project manager for the heat resilience study. We're really excited to speak with you all tonight about heat resilient solutions for Boston during our second community open house today. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to our project team here, and we'll start off with a bit of trivia.
So we're off to a hot start so far for this summer. And we thought it would be fun to ask y'all, how many more years between 1960 and 2020 have had more days above 90 through the end of June than this year? Please feel free to type your answers in the chat and we'll reveal the answer in just a few seconds. So a couple votes for 0. More zeros. 1 for 1. Couple of other ones. 2 and 5, kind of going up a little bit. Yeah, lots of really good guesses. We'll give everyone just a couple more seconds to get their guesses in. Too many, Latifah, we agree with you. All right, well, the answer, many of y'all were right, but it's actually only 1 year. So this year we had 10 days above 90 through the end of June. And the hottest start to the summer, when you measure it that way, was 1976. It had only 1 more day, but we did have 3 days at 89. So we almost could have broken the record, really close. So great job. Several of y'all that guessed that, and many others of you were just off by a tiny bit. So really good guesses.
Right, thanks, Jill and team. So now we'd like to just give a bit of an overview of Climate Ready Boston and the heat resilience study. So Climate Ready Boston is the city's initiative to prepare the city of Boston, its residents, buildings, and infrastructure for the impacts of climate change, both today and in the long term. Next slide, please. And so today we're here as part of the heat resilience study. The heat resilience study is a citywide process to develop solutions that will reduce extreme temperatures and protect people and infrastructure from high heat risk. And so through this process, what we're looking to do is identify the strategies that we can use to reduce heat in the city and make people feel more comfortable, to understand what metrics we can use to measure our success in achieving this goal, and also to define where strategies have the greatest impacts and when these strategies should be in place to be successful. Right. Next slide.
And Zoe, we just had the chief join us.
Oh, we did. Okay, thank you, Jill. I'm going to pause right here. I do want to give Chief Mariama White-Hammond a moment to say hello and give some remarks. Chief?
Thank you so much, Zoe. I mostly just want to say thank you to everyone who has joined us this evening. This challenge of climate change is real. It's affecting all of us, and we did not know that this summer in June, probably for the first time, we would see 6 days, I believe it was, of heat over 90 degrees. And so I just want to say how excited we are to see so many of you, and also to say we really do need your help to figure out how we do this together, because climate change is going to be a big disruptor. But my hope is that we don't just figure out how to survive together, but we let this disruption move us in a direction that makes us better as a city. Move us into a direction where we rely on each other more, where we take care of each other more, we lean into each other more. And so we're hoping that this heat work is not just about sort of keeping ourselves cool, that's an important part of it, staying cool, but also we believe that this is a real opportunity for our city to lead the way to shift. I've grown up here my whole life. I live in one of the heat islands you will see tonight. I live off of Dorchester Ave, right near the Highway 93, right in the flight path of Boston Logan. I think we are officially the noisiest neighborhood in the city of Boston because of the train and the commuter rail. This is about how figuring out me and my neighbors and you, many of you I know also live in some of the heat pockets in our city. So I just want to say thank you for being here, for giving your time. And I look forward to working with folks more down the line as we figure out not just what the city can do, but how the city can partner with you as residents to make our city better, safer, and healthier for all of us. So thank you so much. I'm going from here to a meeting about Malcolm X Park, where I spent a lot of time hanging out as a kid. We're trying to figure out redoing that park. So I'm sorry that I can't stay the whole time, but just wanted to express my gratitude.
Thank you so much, Chief. Thanks for joining us for a little bit. Right, and that is a good segue just back into the heat resilience study work and taking a look at how this is a citywide plan, but we are focusing on some hotspots within the city of Boston. So let's flip to our next slide here. So just before I talk about healthy places, I do want to note that the heat resilience study, it is a citywide process, but we are focusing in on some hotter areas. And so these hotter areas are Chinatown, Dorchester, East Boston, and Mattapan and Roxbury. And we're focusing in on these neighborhoods because, they are some of the hottest, but additionally, we still do have the widespread impacts of systemic racism due to environmental injustices and planning histories in these neighborhoods that have elevated heat exposure and health vulnerabilities. So, while this is citywide, we're looking to bring in some citywide solutions and also ways that we can apply strategies from what we're learning in these 5 neighborhoods. But the heat resilience study is a part of a collaboration called Healthy Places Boston. This is a collaboration between 3 city projects, which includes the heat resilience study, of course, but also the urban forest plan and the open space and recreation plan. So Healthy Places, within Healthy Places, we recognize that many of the themes that these projects cover, they overlap. And we don't want to silo these themes. So Healthy Places is a way that we are collaborating on information and data and outreach to talk about the themes together. And it also provides an opportunity for Boston communities to access all 3 projects and engage with the topics that we'll cover. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Maggie Owens to talk about the urban forest plan.
Thank you, Zoe. Hi, my name is Maggie Owens. I'm with the Parks Department and I'm a project manager for the Urban Forest Plan. And I really appreciate being here with you tonight because there's so much overlap between heat resiliency and the work of creating a more equitable and healthy urban forest. We want to go to the next slide. Trees can do amazing things like cool the city or significantly slow or reduce stormwater runoff, But we also recognize that trees play a spiritual and cultural role in many lives, and I want to say that that's very much considered in this project. But keeping trees alive in a city setting is a challenge, especially in this climate crisis. To grow a healthier urban forest, the project will be looking at all the trees in Boston on both public and private property. The overall goal is to equitably increase canopy, and this will require an A to Z look at things like policy, funding, staffing, design, workforce development, and how to support community members in their tree care, since we know that there's already a lot of good work going on by community members. And throughout this whole process, we'll be talking with the HEAT team and coordinating on goals and strategies. And so that's the briefest of snapshots on the project scope. Now let me share a quick update about where we're at in the project so far. Next slide, please. Thank you. Right now, we're in the information gathering phase and are beginning community engagement. We've assembled the Community Advisory Board, whose first workshop will be coming this Monday. But that's just the start. If you're not a part of the Community Advisory Board, there will be other ways to participate. The CAB will help guide the way we gather community input so that it's meaningful to you and is clearly considered in the creation of the plan. It's composed of 3 bodies: the Intergovernmental Working Group, the Equity Council, and collaborating partners. What's particularly interesting is the Equity Council and the collaborating partners. The Equity Council is composed of representatives from grassroots, community-based organizations working from or in historically excluded and marginalized communities, with representatives selected directly through a separate process. But the collaborating partners is made up of representatives from key partners like institutional partners and players, and engaged members of the public. And we're structuring this so that we protect voices throughout the process to plan in alignment with community values. These 3 bodies will interact through a series of structured workshops and meetings. Next slide. Thank you. And some more updates. As part of the information gathering piece, we're conducting a public street tree inventory, which is about 90% complete. We had more trees than expected, which was great. It should be done by the end of summer, and this data will be publicly available once it's checked for errors. And it'll include information on the health of the tree, the location, and even show you where there's empty tree pits. And I'll just reiterate that public street trees are one piece of the urban forest picture. I know removals on private property are a big concern for many, and we see most canopy loss on private residential lands. And I want to assure you that that is very much a part of the project. Next slide, please. And I could go on forever about this project, but to learn about opportunities to get involved or just keep tab on the latest resources coming out of the project, I just want to encourage you once more to sign up for the Healthy Places newsletter or visit the Urban Forest Plan project page. And we'll be sure to share those links with you in addition to the slides here. So I just want to say, for instance, today on the website, we posted about the 5-year canopy change assessment and how you can explore the amount of canopy in your neighborhood. We have an interactive map and we have the report available for you. My contact info is on the project page, so if you'd like to reach out, I'm definitely available for a call or an email. And I guess with that, I'll hand it back to the HEAT team.
Thank you so much, Maggie. Hi, everyone. I'm Laura Moret. I'm a landscape architect with Sasaki and part of the HEAT team. So just bringing us back to our process today, we just wanted to remind everybody where we are in the schedule for the HEAT study. You can see that, beginning in February and through May, we worked through analysis and a review of existing information. We launched a COMAP survey that asked community members to provide their feedback and their experiences. We had a first open house back in May, and hopefully many of you are returning after that one. And then, in the last couple of months, we've been working through the resilience strategies that we're going to share more about today and really gather your feedback and your input to make sure those are the right ones and see what we're missing. And then moving ahead, we'll be, refining those resilience strategies based on your feedback, and really launching into an implementation roadmap so that we ensure that this plan really has the impacts that we hope to see in making our city a cooler place. And on the next slide, I just wanted to give everyone a little snapshot of a couple of pop-up cool spots that we have created through this process this summer. So if we could just click to the next slide. A number of Boston Public Libraries are providing free outdoor Wi-Fi this summer, and really creating zones for people to sit outside. And so through this plan, we've partnered with BPL and with the Mayor's Office of New Urban Mechanics and the Environment Department to bring online these cool spots, which provide that Wi-Fi, but also create places for people to get cool. So there's strategies like providing shade through placing seating in trees, umbrellas, mist, and we hope these are fun places where we can learn more about how to create comfort and more comfortable spaces within our environment. So this one is at the Eggleston Square branch of the Boston Public Library in Roxbury. And then on the next slide, we see another one that's in East Boston at the Boston Public Library branch there. And I'll mention there's an event tomorrow at this one in the afternoon where people can come out and have some ice cream and get cool. So we welcome to all of you to join us there this summer. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Breeze.
Hello, my name is Breeze. My pronouns are they, them. I'm on the Sasaki team as a landscape designer, and I'll be sharing some of the ideas and feedback we've received so far from the engagements that we've had. Next slide. So first off, thank you to those who've been able to share their heat stories and ideas with us so far. Really appreciate it. So far, we've learned about the barriers to staying cool, some of the existing community heat resilience strategies, as well as ideas for improving heat resiliency. We've gathered this information from nearly 200 people at the first open house, as well as online surveys and the 5 neighborhood idea workshops that we did back in May. Next slide. In regards to barriers to staying cool, we know that it's hot outside, and some of those reasons for it being extra hot is the pavement being, dark pavement and surfaces, pollution, air pollution, concern for workers who work outside and their health, the lack of cool, shady places to sit and rest. And, for this, you have also a shortage in street trees and how those trees are removed. In addition to that, folks talked about police harassment, basically just for being outside. And to add to that, the streets are wide and asphalt gets really hot. And also we learned about some of the hot indoor places. We learned that a lot of people aren't able to afford personal AC units. The heat distracts students at Boston Public Schools from learning. There's a lot of density and development in different neighborhoods, as well as city cooling centers having limited information as well as limiting hours. Next slide. For the online survey, we had 12 people share their stories in regards to hot places during the day. A resident in Dorchester mentioned how Dorchester is a place where people come to shop and eat, but there's not a lot of outdoor cool spaces with, trees and greenery. Other Dorchester resident also mentioned that it's just hot. no need to describe even further. And resident in Rosendale mentioned, the heat becoming a public health emergency. Next slide. We also had 8 respondents do the COMAP survey. Tell us a little bit about some of the cooling places that they went to stay cool. Couple of things that were mentioned was in Dorchester, particularly the beach, Savin Hill Beach. And they talked about how there is, it's a great beach, but without any shade or access to clean, to fresh drinking water or the ability to purchase refreshments, it is still too hot. In addition to that, we had a resident in South End talked about how there are just no cool places inside or hot within a 4-mile radius of where they are. Next slide. So as we mentioned in May, we did a series of neighborhood idea sessions with each of the 5 neighborhoods where we got to talk about some ideas and barriers to being cool. And this is a GIF kind of showing some of the illustrations that we came up with as, we started to brainstorm different items. These came up from, having trees to thinking about how to widen the sidewalks, places that could start to be cooling centers that are non-traditionally cooling centers, so like businesses, and thinking about other methods in the sense of how to support the built environment so that cool breezes can come through the neighborhood. Okay. And some of the themes that came up from those sessions talked about how folks, need air conditioning in their homes. There needs to be more tree protection and expansion of tree planting, need strategies for reducing air pollution, strategies for revising how space is developed, and also more shaded places to sit and park, more water features, cooler schools, policies that protect folks who work outside, as well as community centers that have more extended hours. And we asked folks, which cooling interventions would you likely see more, would like to see more in your neighborhood. Most folks talked about having spaces outdoors that had tree plantings, gardens, or green space, as well as shaded bus stops. Next slide.
Okay, so I'll jump back in here and start to walk through some of the draft heat resilience strategies that we've been working through this process to develop with you all. So if we go to the next slide, just to give kind of a table of contents, there are so many different strategies that can work together to really create heat resilience. And in our time together today, we can't dig deeply into all of them, but we wanted to give you a sense of the full range and then dig into a few of them in more detail to follow. So you can see that we're looking at these strategies within a couple of categories. The first one being, how do we provide relief during heat waves? So this is everything from thinking about operations and communications during those times, how people can cool off. Importantly, what are the social networks that allow people to look out for their neighbors during times of intense heat? And then really just thinking about education and creating more awareness and knowledge for community members during those heat waves. A second category that we're looking at for the strategies is related to cooler communities. So this is really thinking about how our environments can become cooler over time, looking at homes and other buildings within the neighborhoods, thinking about the way that parks, trees, and other outdoor spaces can help to provide cooling benefits and increase comfort, thinking about protecting transportation and infrastructure, and then also the planning and zoning considerations to create cooler communities. And then the last category that we're covering is community health and healing. And so this is thinking more broadly about how to connect to other efforts around creating healthy communities, strengthening those community ties, and also expanding economic opportunity through the heat resilience strategies. And so we will walk through a couple of opportunity areas that have risen to the top through this process, and we'll take turns kind of talking through them briefly. So the first one that we'll cover is looking at the hot neighborhood commercial centers and squares. We know that in a lot of the neighborhoods, through Boston, the hottest places are often those commercial centers where there's more parking. Sometimes there's, narrower sidewalks or not as many opportunities for trees, denser development. So we're looking at strategies for those areas. So on the next slide, you can see some of the heat resilience strategies ideas that have emerged through our first open house and our workshops in the neighborhoods. And so these relate to really creating cool outdoor gathering spaces, thinking about opportunities for partnerships, that not all of this happens on city land, but really requires coordination with other entities. And then really thinking about how, connection with small business, how we can start to introduce leadership programs for small businesses that connect to heat, to cooling. And so you see on the image, this is just an example from Mattapan Square, thinking about everything from opportunities to cool roofs, putting shade in some of those vast parking lots that you see, street trees, and then really thinking about those cooling community networks as well. On the next slide, we just have a few images that start to illustrate what some of these strategies could include. So everything from, shade related to those small businesses, design of streetscapes and parks that create shade and comfort. And then, even thinking about how bus stops and connections to transit can start to provide shade as well. And so, it's a quick spin through each of these. So we'll ask you just to take a moment and reflect and provide any thoughts you have in the chat. Do you think these ideas could provide cooling for cooler commercial areas, and where could, or what kinds of places do you think could benefit the most? So feel free to share your ideas in the chat. Yeah, a note that, needing to think about how strategies and some of the images could provide shade throughout the day, not just at certain moments. Okay. Cover existing parking lots with solar arrays. That's great. Okay, then question if we can flip back. Thank you. Well, I know that it will take some time to process all of this, so feel free to continue to place your thoughts in the chat. Ooh, sprinkler systems, nice. And we'll be capturing these and working through the strategies and making sure that we're capturing your ideas throughout. So with that, I can pass it back over to Breeze to talk about homes.
So the second opportunity area that we discovered and learned about was hot homes. We live in New England. Most of the time we don't need AC, but we've learned recently that, we have hot days and a lot of folks have a challenge with that. Next slide. So we learned that a lot of residents choose to weather the heat wave at home. And majority of folks talked about how, they would stay at home even if it's hot sometimes or all the time. And in addition to that, 58% of the residents are most likely to stay home when it's hot. And so, understanding that, thinking about strategies, you can move to the next slide, thinking about strategies that will help with that, in the sense of being holistic about that approach includes, working on programs for owners and renters in the sense of support for, whether or not that is AC units in, the rental apartments or, cool roofs, checking in on neighbors, setting up a buddy system so folks can get check-in calls during those hot days, having neighborhood climate captains and participatory budgeting. So have folks who are engaged in how their neighborhood is staying cool and coming up with different ways to do that and knowing how to mobilize to different areas in the neighborhood, and also expanding energy assistance and utility policy. So, assisting folks who maybe need those, AC units, or folks who are worried about their electrical bills and figuring out ways to close that gap so that they can have access to cooling while they're at home. And some of those ideas, includes like cool roofs. We talked earlier about how darker pavements radiate more heat. So just lighter roofs could help reflect that heat back rather than the house absorbing that. Having, fans and AC circulating the air to keep it cool, as well as stoops. Sitting outside, when you have a lot of plants near you, they have a cooling effect as well. And the trees, overall, having trees along the streets and yards to help block the sun could also help with staying cool while at home. So one more question. So would these ideas effectively provide cooling for cooler homes? And, what are the places and who could benefit the most from these strategies? Give it a few minutes. Small ideas, no matter the scale, it's always useful when folks are trying to stay cool, especially, building that capacity. Like we mentioned earlier, having a buddy system, planting trees. Okay, increasing the urban staff capacity, yes. Go back a slide. Absolutely. Targeting communities with older folks, yep, helping people get cooler nighttime with air without opening windows. Absolutely. The buddy system, yes. Subsidized for AC units. Awesome. Increase access in waterfront and water areas, yes, more water features. Rooftop gardens, that's a great idea. Yeah, subsidized for landlords to retrofit rental properties. Okay, those are great ideas. Thank you all for participating.
So now we'll shift gears from cool homes to other cool indoor places. So one of the things that our analysis has been looking at is how access to existing cooling centers really varies across the city. And so you can see here a map of Dorchester, and the areas that are lighter, sort of that lighter white color, those are places that are within a 10-minute walk of either a library or an existing BCYF cooling center. And you can see those other color tones, the oranges, the reds, the yellows, those are reflecting the temperature in the week that we looked at in 2019 of places that are outside of a 10-minute walk. So you can see, especially in places in the northern part of the neighborhood and in the northeast part of the neighborhood, it has really hot days and really long duration heat events, and yet it's not within a 10-minute walk of an existing cooling center. So we've been looking at how we can close some of those gaps. We also asked, as part of the survey, if you leave your home to stay cool, where do you go? And interestingly, it probably comes as a little surprise, but official cooling centers were some of the least frequent places that we heard about. So only 11% of people reported going to libraries, and only 4% said that they go to an official cooling center. In contrast, we have more folks that reported going to movie theaters, malls, beaches, friends' homes, and parks. And so as we think about where to add cooling opportunities, these are some of the things we've been keeping in mind. So for an expanded cooling network, based on your feedback, we've really been looking at 3 different strategies that could all work together. So really thinking about improving and expanding the city-run cooling centers. We've heard the need for longer hours, for better signage, more activities to do, and then really complementing that through an expanded community cooling network. So places that people may go already, whether it's local nonprofits, religious institutions, other places with cool indoor spaces that could be other places to escape the heat. And then the third strategy here that we've been looking at is called heat escape vouchers. So you can imagine getting a free movie ticket to go spend the afternoon at the movie theater, places where it's nice and cool and where that voucher could help expand access to places that currently have a barrier to entry from a financial perspective. And so we'd love to hear from you. Do you think that these 3 different strategies working together could help provide more indoor cooling spaces to really expand that network? And who do you think could benefit the most from this? Yeah, so some great comments. Ice cream from Dobie. Comment about places need to be open regularly, not closed on weekends, for example. That's a great point. A few folks that like the idea of vouchers. And good point that museums would be another good option for an indoor cool space. Yeah, so feel free to keep the comments rolling in, and we'll shift on over to the next big opportunity area. A good point too on cooling options about advertising. That's actually a great transition point.
It is. You set us up. Yeah, so the last opportunity area that we're going to highlight tonight that came out of the feedback and the charrette so far, one of the questions that we asked through the engagement process so far was whether people were familiar with assistance programs. And you can see that, it went from people, about 61% of people being familiar with assistance programs for city tree planting, but still needing to spread the word there, down to fewer people who were aware of things like fuel assistance, the Boston Centers for Youth and Families programming and facilities that offer cooling spaces, rental and utility bill assistance, and then only 37% knowing about the weatherization assistance program through ABCD. So clearly, more communication about these opportunities is part of the opportunity that we see. And then on the next slide, yeah, so just a little illustration to start to talk about some of the strategies to increase information and awareness of both about the risks of heat and also opportunities to cool. So everything from creating interactive maps, a public education campaign, utilizing public art to raise awareness, improving the 311 program, expanding the reach of Alert Boston to provide more information, and then emphasizing that resources need to be provided in multiple languages to have the broadest reach possible. And so on the next slide, we'll ask you again to reflect on increasing awareness of heat risks and cooling opportunities. Do you think these strategies would help, and who would benefit the most? So if you can reflect and place your ideas in chat. Okay, we have someone saying that info on cooling centers needs to be distributed door to door because not everyone has access to internet. Great point. Bless you. Figuring out cooling options for those who aren't mobile or have limited mobility, and placing information at bus stops. These are all great ideas. Thank you. So keep them coming. We'll keep moving, but we'll capture any other ideas you'd like to add. Thank you.
All right, and then our final section before we have a bit more discussion time together is really looking at opportunities for these strategies to work together for cooler communities and cooler neighborhoods. So I wanted to start this section with a couple of inspiration images, you know, some close to home, some further away in places like Greece and the UK, but a lot of opportunities for adding shade and adding cooling to even quite dense urban neighborhoods. So in a lot of these parts of Boston that are especially hot spots, there's really a need to think creatively about adding more shade to create cool places in many different neighborhoods. And so whether it's sun sails shown here, you know, ways that fabric can help provide some relief. We've been thinking too about how these canopies could even be a near-term strategy where you've got, say, trees that are planted, and as they're growing, you still have the shade kind of in the near term. And then as the tree gets bigger, you could adjust the shades over time. Maybe there's creative ways to reclaim parking, you know, just a little bit here and there. We know how important parking is too. And also, you know, to the point that came up in chat, but solar canopies or other shading for parking lots. And this is an example from the UK of a microforest. So really thinking about ways to make the most of the space that there is and add green and shade in communities. So we've been taking a bit of a deeper dive into the heat modeling with the help of our partner Myring, who's on from Clamont. And you know, we've really been looking close at where are those micro hotspots. Chinatown is one of the hottest places in the city, as we've been, you know, seeing through this process and hearing about through experiences. And this map starts to show the area right around the Chinatown gate. You can see that indicated with one of the arrows here. This is really one of the hottest places. And even within that, there's some places that are a bit hotter than others. So this map is showing thermal comfort. So that's a bit of an academic term to really talk about how hot it feels. So it takes into account where the sun is, how humid it is, winds that are kind of helping provide a bit of relief. And it takes all those factors, and essentially it's like the heat index, but it's helping show where within this neighborhood is especially hot on an average summer day. And you can see those darker tones of red are getting much, much hotter. And even the blues, they're still quite warm. So blue shouldn't be taken as, you know, perfectly comfortable. And some of the interesting takeaways, we'll look at a few different spots in this map. But if you look along the east-west streets, for example, Neelan Street, Beach Street, you start to see a different pattern emerging with those colors. And so what you can start to see is that the north sides of the street are actually much hotter. And the southern sides of those streets, they get a little bit more shade from the buildings right there. And so this can help us think about how to really prioritize shading, adding more trees in places that have the most sun, really being focused with those efforts. And Tamar, anything you'd like to add from an urban design and architecture perspective here?
Sure. I'm Tamar Warburg from Sasaki, architect and director of sustainability. And again, we really see here, what is it about the city, and even on the next slide, that really turns certain neighborhoods into heat islands in the city, even areas that don't cool off at night, right? The massive buildings, the lack of not only street trees, but parks and relief from the relentless building materials that absorb heat during the day and re-radiate it at night. Is that on your next slide, I think, Jill? No?
It's okay.
Okay. So in terms of the breaking up some of those broad stretches, thinking about creative programs, you know, what can we do in terms of architecture? What can we do in terms of urban design to actually start to break up those stretches of hardscape and provide some softscape, provide some shade, both built and natural. So it's kind of a combination of the previously mentioned strategies of the main streets, the indoor spaces, the outdoor spaces, and awareness in the form of programming.
So with that, we're going to switch gears into the last portion of our evening together with some discussion and feedback time.
Diana, do you want to jump in here? Otherwise I can. Okay, so maybe we can advance to the next slide. So we're going to ask everybody to take a moment for some self-reflection and think through a couple of questions, and then we're going to take some time in the breakout rooms to discuss these together in groups. So thinking about everything that we've discussed today, you know, what are the ideas for you personally that would provide the most near-term relief from heat? And then, you know, related to that, a second question, what are the most important strategies for your community as a whole? And then what ideas are we missing? You know, we want to make sure that we're capturing all of the great ideas you have, you know, your lived experience in your neighborhoods, to make sure that we're incorporating those into the plan as we move it ahead. So you can see there's a URL code that you can scan, or there's a, like on the name. There's a code you can scan using your phone, so you can use the camera function on your phone to scan that, or you can type in the website that's listed beneath it and use that to place your ideas in the Easy Retro board. So we'll give you about 5 minutes. We'll be able to see everybody's responses as they pop up, and then we can get together and talk about them.
And if you go into the chat, Jill posted the site and you can just double click in the chat if that's the easiest.
Yes, thanks, Tamar. QR code, that's what I was looking for. If anyone's having trouble accessing this, just put a note in the chat and we can help. And yes, Tyler, we absolutely will capture all of the feedback given in the chat and incorporate that into the strategies or into the takeaways from the meeting. Thank you. Okay, so we're starting to see some ideas popping up. So in terms of things that would provide the most near-term relief for individuals, shaded bus stops, water features, cooling vouchers, information about how to stay cool in your house without an AC, providing support to run ACs, information about fans and fan placement, drinking water campaign and mascot, love it. And then central AC or cooling strategies in one's own home. And then in terms of community strategies, we're seeing increasing the tree canopy, increasing shaded areas around parking, public spaces, school playgrounds, cooling vouchers, AC subsidies, removing pavement and lightening pavement, major street and sidewalk redesigns to reclaim asphalt. These are all wonderful. Thinking about microforests and canopies, protecting existing trees, and then also those social networks, heat wave buddies and phone trees. So seeing ideas that are missing, these are great. So community polling on the hot zones that need immediate attention, that's a great point. Porous pavement and pocket parks, Collaborate for swimming class discounts because not everybody has the privilege of learning to swim. That's a great point. Okay. Focusing on what to provide for those who work outside every day in extreme heat. Great point. Vertical green spaces to cool buildings. Providing homeowners and businesses options to add tree canopy. These are great. So we'll make sure that anything that we've missed gets reflected back into the strategies. And then all of your comments about what would provide relief to you personally and to your community more broadly will help to prioritize those strategies moving ahead. Jill, do we want to give everybody a couple more minutes to reflect, do you think? Yeah, okay. Seeing one in the chat, create an easy way to find online maps of the solutions wherever you are. That's a great idea. I think it's great to see across all of these categories that some of them are very sort of physical ideas about our buildings and our streets and parks and trees. And then there's also a lot in here about the kind of social aspects of resilience and, oh yeah, thanks, we can scroll down. And the way that communities can come together to support each other during heat. Good point, we need to reduce energy consumption, so make sure that we're not contributing to increased climate change. Okay. So I think we can take these ideas as a basis for moving into breakout rooms and starting to have some discussions with each other about what we would prioritize for ourselves, for our neighborhoods, and then also what's missing. Great question on interpretation. So actually, I'm going to defer. I believe that the folks needing translation will stay in the main room, and the translators will be able to work with them there. And then there'll be other breakout rooms that some folks will fly out to.
Yes, there'll be one additional breakout room that is for Spanish translation. And then for all the other languages, they'll remain in the main room. And then we'll have a series of breakout groups for the rest of the crew that doesn't need translation. And thank you all for bearing with us for just getting these breakout groups set up. And we'll be ready to go in a minute.
All right, while we're waiting, I'm going to see what else you popped in here. Oh, this is interesting. So seeing how the strategies can impact the other seasons. So thinking not just about the heat, but how those places can function across the year. Retrofitting churches. It's a great idea, thinking about those partnerships with other entities. And then artists to help with messaging, visualization, and education. Let's see, swimming lessons for larger populations through schools and community centers. Yeah, these are great. Thanks, everyone.
We're going to go ahead and give breakout groups a try. If you need interpretation, stay in the main room and we'll get you to the correct spot. But we want to make it easy to make sure we're keeping interpreters together with anyone that's listening in a different language. So just ignore the prompt and hang out right where you are. And if you have any trouble, chat in the chat and we'll get you to the right spot. So we'll spend about 20 minutes, maybe about 15 in the breakout groups together, talking through those same questions that you just shared some ideas on. So I'm going to give this a try. So I'll click the breakout room button and then you all, some of you will see a prompt to join a room and otherwise I'll help you get to the right spot. So stay tuned for just a moment. So everyone should be joining their breakout groups. And if anyone is currently in the main room and prefers English, if you just let me know and I'll send you to one of the breakout rooms. Oh, and I will let everyone unmute. So if you have a question, you can share. Okay, so everyone should be able to unmute if you would like to request to go to a different spot.
Thanks for getting us all set up on breakout rooms still. Is